Good morning, good afternoon, and good evening in case we have any foreign participants here. At the very outset, I would like to thank SOIS and Ambassador Devre for giving me this opportunity to share my thoughts on MSP and regional cooperation with this August gathering. This subject is so vast and developing that, like a traditional hydrographer, the more I looked into the details with a magnifying glass, the more complicated things became. So I thought it best to break it down, and I will start off with what the past, present, and future had for us, with some of my thoughts and inferences injected in on the basic requirements of sustainability and growth in the future. Talking about the past, it would suffice to say the desire to have national jurisdiction on adjoining sea areas was formalized through a landmark convention on law of the sea by the United Nations. The point to note was that the focus at that time was generally on security rather than development by member states at that time. With the beginning of this century, there has been a renewed focus on the maritime space as well as rights and responsibilities within this domain, delineated through the concept of boundary at sea, with claims extending up to the continental shelf. Climate change, sea level changes, pollution, acidification are much talked about subjects these days. That brings us to the future with the United Nations Sustainable Development Goals, which have been compressed into the decade of oceans with seabed 2030 and a host of similar initiatives being talked about these days. So why do I think Sustainable Development Goal 14, that is life below water, is so important to not only India but also the region? Let me start with some statistics. The United Nations Conference on Trade and Development, UNCTAD, says that Asia dominates the global trade arena, accounting for about 50% of the goods loaded and unloaded. And we are part of this region. And is therefore maritime hub with half the countries featuring among the top 20 ship owners being from Asia. This includes, the top 20 includes India. Secondly, Bangladesh has the largest global share of recycled tonnage and together with India and Turkey represents 90% of the ship recycling activity in 2019. So here we have employment and pollution issues. A recent World Bank report has indicated there exists room for improving the ports in South Asia. Deep draft requirements, infrastructure in cargo handling and hinterland connectivity are some of the issues. This would further improve economic jobs and standards of living in the region. This is exactly what the government of India is presently doing. South Asia now has a population of 1.9 billion. That is roughly one fourth of the world population, which is growing at an approximate rate of over 1%. India is one of the top 7 countries which contributes to 50% of the global capture fish production, that is with the fishing trawlers, etc. This is as per the FAO. But at the same time, I must mention that aquaculture fish production is dominated by India, Indonesia, and Bangladesh with 89% share and 50 million jobs in the industry, in fishing itself. So once again, we found an alternative as far as fishing is concerned. Coming to prosperity of the people, the government of the region has been generally more successful than those in other regions in ensuring a healthy growth trajectory over the last few decades. So much for the domestic economy. On the global front, India has been engaging at international, regional, and bilateral levels for promoting trade, amongst other things. Things like SAARC, Look East, Act East, IORA, SASE, that is Sub-Regional Economic Cooperation, Asia-Africa Growth Corridor, BIMSTEC, and finally Sagar are some of the initiatives, just to name a few. So economic cooperation will continue to fuel growth in the region for the future, as has happened in the past. Now, considering the picture that emerges with a few prominent factors like population, shipping, fishing, and trade, South Asia should logically have translated the marine spatial planning concept into a coordinated regional action plan to further accelerate the existing growth rates. The silver lining is that hydrographers have been actually doing spatial planning to some extent from the day we started producing charts. I'll explain to you this. Since very early days, charts and navigation publications have not only elaborately described the flora, fauna of faraway lands, but also listed weather conditions, etc., trading preferences, and local cultures in their navigation volumes. This practice is followed to date with some modifications dictated by technology. Detailed account of sailors like Vasco da Gama and Columbus have attracted and guided sailors to this day and give an exhaustive description of everything that happened at sea those days. With this background, hydrographic offices have been holding the most elaborate database worthy of being classified as an ingredient for marine spatial planning. Underwater cables, pipelines, fishing prohibited areas, oil fields, marine protected areas, maritime boundaries are some of the information common to MSP and the charts which are generated from this database and used by mariners on a daily basis. There is something else that has been happening in the maritime space over the last few decades. The increase in shipping traffic has prompted coastal states and IMO to create recommended routes and traffic separation schemes in areas of traffic convergence and congestion. For the benefit of non-mariners amongst the audience, it is like the need to have a flyover or a traffic light at a road crossing which was once not required. The point I'm trying to make is that our region is leading on all parameters as brought out earlier, and very soon the maritime real estate around us will be overcrowded. So, what should we do with the deadline of 2030? I have a few suggestions. Firstly, use the existing database in the hydrographic office to create a spatial plan for the real estate distribution to various sectors. Overlaps, conflicting claims, etc., and all other aspects can be addressed through pointed scientific studies and stakeholder discussions. And this will ensure sustainability. Then would have the least investment in this kind of approach will have the least investment as far as time and costs are concerned. Secondly, use the bilateral, multilateral, and other platforms as mentioned earlier to jointly evolve a regional MSP which would ensure sustainability of the oceans with the rising demands of the future. There is a reason to do this because as part of the follow-up and review mechanism, the 2030 Agenda for Sustainable Development encourages member states to conduct regular and inclusive reviews. This voluntary national reviews, or VNRs as they are called, aim to facilitate sharing of experiences, successes, challenges, and lessons learned. I have gone through the submissions of VNRs of Bangladesh, India, Myanmar, Sri Lanka, Maldives, and Indonesia. Unfortunately, there is no regional initiative towards MSP in any of these reports submitted between 2017 and this year. Before I go to the third suggestion, I would like to highlight that there is no other bay like the Bay of Bengal in this world, which is blessed with so many nutrient-rich rivers, mangroves, and biosphere, supporting a large population. Not to forget Nepal and Bhutan, which, although landlocked, can and should be stakeholders in the MSP as detailed in Part 10 of the UNCLOS. There is a word of caution, though, that cross-border cooperation requires creating a sense of collective purpose and trust, and straightaway reminds me of Sagar, which can be the vehicle for achieving this. I would now like to highlight some of the possible hurdles that stand in the way of implementing a regional MSP. Take one example of green energy generating wind farms. With the growing scarcity of land, installing wind farms at sea is an option, however, is a costly one in terms of maintenance and construction. It can conflict with fishing areas and interfere with shore-based radar stations. Other than there are other issues also which may come up. This is just an example to highlight the consultative process required for MSP at the national as well as the regional level. There are similar issues with alignment of shipping lanes, fishing areas, and host of other parameters. We then have some gaps and loopholes in the UNCLOS also, which are exploited by illegal activities including IUU. Indirect negative effects on the fish stock are bound to happen due to such unaccounted and unregulated activity. There is presently no instrument to address these, and cooperation is essential for administering the high seas in our adjoining areas. Biodiversity beyond national jurisdiction is which should be therefore given top priority in the region. Safety of mariners is the next topic that I will discuss. SOLAS Convention, as you all know, lays down detailed minimum standards for the construction, equipment fit, and operation of ships. Navigation requirements are being fulfilled by hydrographic offices through IHO and the WMO. Unfortunately, this applies only to cargo ships of 500 tons or greater. Warships, along with small craft, including fishing boats and pleasure craft, have been exempted from this convention. The growing population of small craft operating in our national waters and even the high seas around us do need all maritime safety related information as is being provided to the SOLAS compliant large ships. This safety requirement is not only for the craft but also for the dense offshore infrastructure which is likely to come up in the maritime domain through the next few years. The thought process on these lines has already started, and hopefully we shall be able to provide appropriate services to mariners of all classes using available technology. This has an indirect bearing on MSP since it facilitates regulation and control of small craft. In conclusion, sir, I did some basic studies on urban, rural, and town planning processes. At the end of it, I learned some lessons which I'll narrate now. Urban and rural spatial planning is very unique for each country and region. No Western or European model can fit any country in this region, and so is the case with MSP as well. We need to therefore evolve it for the conditions specific to the region. Secondly, urban and rural spatial planners start off with basic cadastral maps which go through an iterative process with all stakeholders and culminating into a finalized plan to meet the targets. So is the suggested way to follow in the maritime space also, as recommended in the IOC UNESCO document. Thirdly, urban and rural spatial planners need to be conscious of the proximity and characteristics of cities, villages nearby it, and factor them in appropriately. Example is the multi-lane expressways connecting Delhi with Gurugram and Greater Noida. This is so very true for MSP as well with all regional partners. We need to connect with expressways. So hydrographers do have a major role to play in the MSP process with not only their data but also supply of MSP information to mariners in the form of charts, and this in my opinion will be the most cost effective and time saving option for consideration. A word about UNCLOS. It is unlikely that the world will ever agree upon redrafting the UNCLOS anywhere in the near future. Therefore, administration of high seas to counter illegal activities will remain a challenge. This can partially be addressed if we can resolve the maritime claims and boundary issues in the region with our neighbors. Settlement of boundary disputes is a prerequisite for a thriving regional MSP. And if a vibrant MSP is established in the region, then a question arises: what happens to freedom of navigation as slated in the UNCLOS? That can be discussed on a later date. With that, I would thank you very much for giving me this opportunity, sir.